Hello and welcome to Downforce Debrief and welcome to a new Formula One season. It's finally here. Myself and Alex are excited to talk to you guys today about it all, and we are going to go straight in and talk about the winners and the losers from the Grand Prix. So, Alex, straight off the bat, who's your first winner from the Grand Prix?
Do you know what? I'm not going to start with an easy one, GB. I'm going to start with a bit of a wild one. I think for me, Lewis Hamilton was a winner from the Australian Grand Prix. Look, he got out-qualified, he got beaten in the race, all these other things. His pace wasn't quite on Leclerc, but he made no mistakes at all from what we saw. Leclerc literally spun, and okay, it was a nice overtake on Leclerc to get back past him. But it was really good. It was his first race, first time driving that car in the wet. He didn't really know what he was doing. Okay, he moaned about it over the radio, but, you know, bear in mind that literally just gets... Hamilton gets played more than anyone else. I think it would be the main thing there. But I was really impressed with him. I thought he did really, really well. If Ferrari didn't bottle their strategy, he would have been getting some decent points. He was struggling to overtake, but most people were. There wasn't many on-track overtakes. I thought it was a good start to Ferrari life for Hamilton, but I don't think that's maybe a common opinion. DB, do you disagree?
Yeah. So just for clarity, you're saying Hamilton is a winner for being out-qualified and beaten by his teammate.
Not for that, just generally the weekend. I think, imagine if he turned up and just out-qualified Leclerc and just smashed in the race. Everyone would be like, what the hell? Especially in a wet weekend. No one was expecting that. I think he was probably a bit closer than maybe he could have been. Yeah, okay, he could have been closer, but I think it was a solid weekend. No mistake. Leclerc spun, for God's sake. Like, Leclerc wasn't good this weekend. Hamilton drove better.
But then you'd argue that he spun and still beat Hamilton.
Yeah, fair. But it was a nice overtake on Hamilton. Like, you know, I'm not saying, you know, Leclerc was terrible. It was a beautiful move on Hamilton and, you know, whatever else. But, you know, Leclerc's been that team for so long now. He knows the inside out. So the fact that Hamilton came straight in and was that close, everyone always goes on about how incredible Leclerc is, always incredible in qualifying. Hamilton was in 2/10 of him in his first race. I think that's decent.
Yeah, I was just going to say that is fair. I was impressed with that. I thought Leclerc would be further ahead in quali than what the gaps were. I will say, though, that I wasn't too impressed from Hamilton's racecraft. It's not really anything new. I feel like he's been quite passive and just not aggressive enough. And what's the word? Just not really taking the opportunity when it's there to pass drivers when it's on. The Piastri move at the end on the final lap, as much as it was a great move from Piastri, I kind of watched that and thought, would that have happened if it was another, you know, if that was Leclerc, for example, would that move have happened? I feel like he would have defended that a lot harder and placed his car more, you know, differently when Piastri went for that. Just one example, but I personally, I feel like Hamilton, I wouldn't say was a loser from that, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't class him as a winner given that he was beaten by his teammate. Yes, okay, with his first race in the red colours. It was smooth, I would say. It was smooth sailing. He should be happy with that. Was he a winner as a result? I don't know. I thought he was a bit too passive for my liking. I
definitely agree with that. I think Hamilton for a while has been too passive. Ever since he had that dominant car, he, you know, figured out that he didn't need to be aggressive. He could just chill and still win races, and he's never managed to get that fire back. So I do completely agree. But there wasn't many on-track overtakes, to be fair. Like, it was hard to overtake. Antonelli was definitely the exception and they're not the rule. It was just super hard to overtake, and I actually analysed this. I looked into it to see if Hamilton was doing something wrong, if like he was just braking way too early for that corner or just not being ballsy enough or losing too much time in the previous corner. But I actually directly compared him to Antonelli when they were both in traffic trying to make an overtake. I compared him to Antonelli while he's behind Lance Stroll. And he was doing nothing wrong. Like, not that I could see from the data. It's not like he was braking way too early or being too cautious. Like, he was actually carrying more speed into that corner that Antonelli kept making overtakes into. And let's not forget, Antonelli qualified 16th, so he was overtaking slower cars than what Lewis was trying to. So, but I do agree. He definitely needs to, if he wants to come out on top, I guess, of that Ferrari, he does need to be more aggressive. There's absolutely no doubt about that. He's definitely just a little bit too passive right now, and he doesn't make the moves where he needs to.
Yeah. I think for me as well, I think it was Lewis that was stuck behind Albon for so many laps and he's clearly quicker at that point. And it was frustrating because you're like, you're quicker than this guy. You can get past him. But every time he got to like 2-3 tenths, he just didn't really have a look. And you said it right then. Antonelli I was going to mention, perfect example, as soon as he got within a sniff of Albon at the end, just fully sent it into that chicane, which was incredible.
It was unbelievable.
It was such an opportunistic move. It was brilliant. And that was my first impression. As soon as I saw Antonelli do that, I was like, amazing move. Hamilton, why didn't you do that earlier in the race? That could have changed his whole race, because I have no doubt that he would have opened a gap on Albon if he'd have got past at that point. So, yeah.
Let's move on to Antonelli in a second, but Lewis Hamilton, right? How many people didn't make any major mistakes in the Australian Grand Prix? Because Norris did, he went off. Piastri did, he went off. Max went deep and let Piastri through. Leclerc spun. Antonelli spun. Behrman, I think, had some sort of whoopsie stuff. But like, most people had some sort of issue at some point. Hamilton didn't have any, and that's what impressed me in the first race. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like, oh, what a drive, it was the best drive. Like, very much not. I just think, considering all the hype Leclerc's got, considering, everyone says he's passed it, Leclerc's, going to demolish him, that didn't happen. I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised is what I'm saying, rather than like it was incredible. I'm pleasantly surprised. But we mentioned Antonelli there. I think we should talk about Antonelli, Lex, because oh my God, he blew my socks off. To be a rookie, like a proper rookie, not like a Behrman rookie where he's actually done a few Grand Prix, or Lawson rookie where he's done actually like 5 or 6 Grand Prix or whatever. He literally never raced in F1 before. He'd driven the car before and stuff, but like, that's mad. To then have that kind of race as well. Okay, he did have a spin. And got lucky to get away with that. Fair. But ignoring that, other than that, it was a phenomenal drive. Made a few on-track overtakes, more than most people were able to make, and to stay largely out of trouble in that race, make the right strategy calls. I don't know how much the team made it for him and stuff, but to come away, and like I said, that move at the end on Albon just sums up his race perfectly. That was outrageous. What a move that was. To bring it home P4 after his penalty was rescinded, that was just unbelievable. Godlike drive. 16th to 4th.
Literally, if you're Toto Wolff watching that, you got to be smiling to yourself. Russell, we'll touch on him in a little bit as well. Super smooth, consistent race, and then having a teammate like Antonelli that can do that. At 17 years old is he? I believe he's 17 now. I think that's
must be 18. Right. It must be at least 18. You have to be 18 to be in F1 now. So
okay. Yeah, it's
18,
honestly
18,
incredible. 18 years old, it's unbelievable. Like, if you're Toto Wolff, you got to be looking at yourself in the mirror, smiling and saying, "I've made the right decision inside of this kid," because he looks brilliant.
Absolutely. Should we move on to losers? Well, come on, what have you got for me? What are you impressed with?
I think for me, I'm going to go for the obvious one, who's been getting a lot of stick on social media, Liam Lawson. I think he just wasn't a good race from him, was it? I think I was expecting more. You've got the Red Bull second seat of Sergio Perez that got so much scrutiny and criticism, and rightfully so, over a long period of time. You're kind of thinking, have they turned a new leaf? Have they turned a new page? Are they going to get a promising teammate alongside Max to score some consistent points? Didn't happen at all. He didn't look comfortable. He obviously then lost the car, and it wasn't a good weekend for Liam Lawson. And to be honest, I mean, we touched on, I think it was the last episode of the podcast, I did call it that I don't see Liam Lawson being anywhere near Max throughout the season. I think we'll have a similar situation with Sergio Perez. I'm not going to go jump on some sort of hate bandwagon already. And, don't get me wrong, I'm no anti Liam Lawson fan or whatever. It wasn't a good weekend. And I would say, racking my brains, I would say probably the worst. He came out worst of any driver from the weekend. Would you agree with that?
I'll give him a bit of slack for now, because yes, he's in a top team. Look, we can't just go, give him 5-10 races or whatever, because he's in a top team. He's supposed to be performing straight away, just like Antonelli did. Okay, but quality a little bit. But in general, Antonelli obviously showed why he's there. Lawson didn't. But I'm going to give him a bit of slack for now, because I just think, we can't already be piling the pressure on him and saying he's terrible, yada, yada, yada. At the moment, obviously, it's not looking good. Really, in that car, to not be able to make any real progress in the race, in a car that was clearly second quickest in Max Verstappen's hand, whereas Antonelli's car was third quickest, he just couldn't make any progress. That didn't look good. Obviously, he actually had a spin as well, just before he DNF'd, by the way. He had a spin as Norris came past him, and then DNF'd just a few corners later. So, yeah, it is tricky conditions, and that's why I'm giving him some slack. If that was like fully dry race, not so much. Very, very tricky conditions for any rookie. I know he's not a complete rookie, but still. I'm just going to hold judgment for now. It wasn't impressive. Honestly, the bigger concern for me, regardless of any of this, would be the people who've decided to sign these second Red Bull drivers. Like, you know, let's remove the slack we're giving him for now, right? And say, obviously, it was a terrible debut, yada, yada. If we're going to get, like, what would this be? I don't know, the 4th or 5th driver in a row that will be gobbled up by Max Verstappen. Like, I know Max is incredible. I know he's barely got a match out there. Like, fair. We're not expecting someone to come in and be smashing Max. Fine. But we need someone that's going to get vaguely close. Like, we can't have people there. Because I always say, like, put two of the second Red Bull cars in the race, and the Red Bull looks like proper midfield material, doesn't it? Which it just isn't. So... Yeah. Honestly, if they flopped again, they've destroyed another driver's career, and they've flopped again with a driver. Why the hell is the board or whoever letting these guys continue signing people? Because they don't know what they're doing, clearly. But we'll wait for now. Yeah, but it's not good early signs.
It's such and you know, going even coming a little bit away from Liam Lawson there. You mentioned about a second Red Bull seat, and I mean, I certainly don't have any kind of definitive data or anything, but it is an interesting conundrum that, you know, people often talk about. Well, Alex Albon, we know he's a cracking driver. He's done really well at Williams. He has proven himself as a great driver, in my opinion, dragging that Williams car to where it shouldn't be on multiple occasions. Then you've got drivers like Gasly, again, good driver. We know he's a proven good driver in Formula One. I'm kind of sat there thinking, at this point, is it just the drivers? Okay, I get it. None of these are as good as Max. I completely agree with you. We're not expecting someone to come in and just compete with Max on the timesheet. But to be like, I mean, sometimes even a second off. I mean,
yeah, like nowhere.
Yeah, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't add up. And I don't know whether it's as simple as saying, well, we know that obviously the philosophy, you know, the setup of the car is built around Max, and we know that he likes a car that's very on the nose. And whether, you know, his teammates are just not able to adapt to that as well as him, whether that's the reason for the pure pace difference. But I know we're also... Yeah.
Again, this is still a management issue, though, isn't it? This is still a full management issue because, yeah, if they're building a car around Max, they're choosing to do that, and that's perhaps not smart. Like the whole thing, you know, maybe not giving him as good a car as Max or something. A lot of rumours around that kind of thing. Again, that's a team management decision. Like, they're still messing this up. They lost the Constructors' Championship because of it last season. You know, they're destroying drivers' careers. Not that they really care about that, but they surely care about scoring as many points as they can with that car. I don't know. It just reeks of mismanagement, to be honest. It's very strange.
Yeah. It is interesting, and it's interesting to think, how can that possibly change? Like, if that is the reason, then are they suddenly going to develop a car around, you know, they're going to have to keep developing around Max, aren't they? It'd almost be interesting to see if Max, you know, you see all these crazy rumors about Max going to Mercedes and all this, that, and the other, which I don't think for a second is going to happen anytime soon. But let's just say that did happen. I'd be really interested to see how they then manage that, and how, you know, whether that means that suddenly the different drivers would gain more time because they'd have a car that's built more around them, or I don't know. I completely agree with you, though.
Or would Red Bull struggle to build a car around them, and suddenly they would have two Perez's, two Lawsons, whatever, in that car, and suddenly they're just in the midfield fight because all they've done is built the car around Max for so many years. Yeah. I mean, Honda did exactly that in MotoGP. They built their bike around Marquez for so many years, and Marquez was still able to get podiums and wins of it and stuff, and then no one else could do anything. So when Marquez left, they were literally a backmarker team. They were literally a backmarker team, like the slowest team some of the races, like mad. So like it's just not a smart. It's mismanagement. So as I said, we're holding judgment for now. But regardless of what the judgment will end up being, I'm still basically entirely blaming the management because it's early days. Maybe it'll be fine. Maybe next race he'll be right there with Max, and then for the rest of the season it'll be fine. Because it was a hard debut, but it's not looking good, bruv, is it?
No, it's not. And I guess we've waffled enough about Liam Lawson and Red Bull. Have you got another loser?
Oh, I've got many. You know me, mate. Negative Nancy. I've got my list is as long as your arm. All right, a bit of a rogue one. Crofty. Why the hell does he pronounce Isaac Hadger like it's Badger? That's not how you say it. That's not how you say it. Isaac Hadger. It's Hadjar. Hadger. It's not Hadger. He said it all race and it was doing my absolute nutting. It's Hadger. Hadger's going for a move. Like, who's that? What are you talking about? Brundle was saying it right. It's so annoying.
Maybe this says more about you're picking out people's grammar or something. Because I did not even notice that at all. So yeah, like after this podcast, I feel like I want to go and pull up a YouTube highlights video and listen out for the amount of times it's said now. It'll
great. Annoy you now. But Alex Jakes in highlights and stuff says it Hadger. Brundle says it Hadger. No, to be fair, Crofty normally is quite good at doing his research. Like, look, he gets a bit of hate and whatever else, but he does work hard at what he does. And he does normally do the research. He normally goes and asks the driver, like, how should I pronounce your name, yada, yada. So I assume he's done that, but I still just can't get over it. It just sounds wrong, Hadger. It's not... I don't know. It upset me, but apologies to anyone who didn't notice and now is going to be noticing it and it's going to be annoying them as well. But maybe also Crofty can sort it out. We'll see.
I love how we've got him with what is this like the second thing on the list of losers? Are you ranking this above other drivers' DNFs?
Well, it annoyed me more than most, so maybe I am. I don't know. I just thought I'd start with some spicy moments this week, not start with the obvious stuff. We'll start with the interesting ones.
Nice, mate. Nice. Well, I hadn't picked up on that at all. So, yeah, maybe next time I'll pay more attention to Crofty's grammar. But I want to go back to Lewis Hamilton because we need to talk about Ferrari. They had a disaster class at Australia, and not just on the strategy, because that was horrendous. Them keeping Hamilton and Leclerc out on the hard tyres, and then even going on the radio to Hamilton and be like, you're P1. And then it's like, well, no, mate, because I got a box now and now we're at the back again. Not just that, but also the team radio to Hamilton was shambolic. It was not just Hamilton, it was Leclerc, I think, said once to his engineer, but how many times do they have to come on and be like, can you stop repeating yourselves? And then also, just questioning everything all the information they were receiving, lack of weather information. I mean, it was a Ferrari strategy disaster class, and a reminder to any Hamilton fans or anyone thinking that maybe this will be a new Ferrari era, that as much as okay, you've got a 7-time world champion driver Lewis Hamilton, you've still got the Ferrari strategy team and these kind of things going on over the radio. So yeah, what did you think?
There's only so much polishing you could do to your turd. Is that what you're trying to say? It's still Ferrari disaster class on strategy. Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, it's like, obviously there's some teething issues there with the engineer. Hamilton's a very experienced driver. He likes it how he likes it. He wasn't able to bring his race engineer over. There's going to be a bit of learning period there. As I said, you got to bear in mind, Hamilton's radio gets played so much more than everyone else's. Like, I can see the Facebook comments now said, "Oh, classic Hamilton, just moaning, like, spoiled, well, yada yada yada." It's because he's such a big driver and so many people care about him. His get played more. He won't moan more than the other average person. So we did hear that more than most. But yeah, it was a bit of a shambles, him saying like, can you stop repeating? Like, I know, shut up, sort of thing. And it was like, it sounds like Hamilton doesn't like much info. But one of the things they told at one point was it sounds like he was struggling to activate DRS because DRS is hydraulically activated, as are the gears. So I know in some cars, if you try and pull both at the same time, it just won't work. The car just goes, oh, that's too much. So that was one of the things they were trying to tell him is maybe shift first, then pull DRS, don't pull them at the same time. And that's one of the things he responded to and said, oh, leave me alone, I'm learning the car, sort of thing, which I guess fair to some extent. If Howard says that, why didn't DRS open, then they can answer him. It depends. If it keeps happening, they need to be like, you're missing DRS, bro. But if it only happened once and they've immediately come over, I guess they're trying to help him, like, get acclimatized to the car. But it's obviously not what Hamilton wants. It's just a bit of teething issues. I don't think it's a big issue. But I did want to look up. I couldn't find a transcript anywhere, but I did want to look up how many times Hamilton said, "Leave me alone," because we heard it like 3 or 4 times. So I wonder how many more there was. But yeah, in terms of the strategy, so I'm actually looking into this quite heavily for my main channel video. And they definitely stayed out too long, and that's absolutely clear. But So Antonelli was about 2 seconds behind Hamilton before Antonelli who pit the same lap as Norris, which is basically as soon as the rain started getting heavy. So he was ahead of Antonelli, and Antonelli ended up finishing fourth. He restarted after that safety car period in fifth. So worst case fifth if even though he couldn't get Albon, whereas Hamilton ended up ninth. So clearly if they pit the same lap, they would have been ahead of Antonelli. They'd have been in fifth place, loving life much, much better than where they were. Fine. But actually, even if they waited one lap and then pit, they had a decent chance of coming out ahead of Antonelli. It would have been very tight, because the first half of the lap was pretty dry. So Lewis managed to gain a little bit on Antonelli, who was now on Inters, but then lost it in the final sector, which was really wet. It would have been tight, but worst case scenario, he would have come out just behind him and he would have been in sixth place on the restart. Much better than the ninth place. So even though they missed that first pit stop, they should have then pit the next lap. Even the lap after that, which is the lap that Max Verstappen pit, would have been all right. He would have lost a few seconds. I don't know the exact gaps, but he definitely would have been higher than where he was. It'd have been okay. Weirdly, nobody pit the lap after Norris and Antonelli and all the people who gained a lot. No one pit the lap after. It's really weird. So there's no data on whether that was the right lap or not. Some people pit that first lap, no one pit the middle lap, and then the rest pit the last lap, and only Ferrari went longer, which was clearly a mistake, yeah, because they lost, I think, the first half of that final lap, which ended up being the in lap, also the safety car lap. Hamilton lost in the first half, which was the dry half, 15 seconds is what he lost in half a lap. So that was just like, before that it was like maybe a bit wrong, but you can sort of get away with it. But like 15 seconds in half a lap, come on. Luckily they got away with it a little bit because the safety car came out and gave him a cheaper pit stop. But 15 seconds in half a lap, they were so wrong. With both cars as well. Why not split the strategy?
That's quite interesting because I remember Crofty and Brundle were almost having an argument over commentary at that point because Crofty was just like, well, hang on, why would they box him now? And Brundle was kind of saying, well, it's they need to come in for the Inters. Look at the weather conditions. But Crofty was saying, well, why leave them out on the hard tyres in the beginning and then not kind of follow through on that? Just keep them on the hard tyres because it was a bit of an argument that if they'd have kept them on the hards, and obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we saw, I don't know how many laps later, but it did dry up ish again not too long after. I think, though, it still was the right call. I think the track was too wet, even with it drying up a bit. I think if they'd have stayed on hards, they would have been completely screwed on the restart. So, I think they made the right call, but they made the call way too late. Basically, you could see why Ferrari were doing that. They were hoping that they could gain track position, maybe a safety car red flag. Maybe like a red flag, something like that. Or the track dries up, but then they just they didn't stay true to their gamble, and then they just boxed way too late and lost all that track position. So kind of the worst of both worlds, really. And not very well thought out.
I think they were hoping that, obviously the main hope was it wasn't going to rain as much as it did. Like you said, if there was an earlier safety car, they might have been all right, or if there's a red flag, they'd have been loving life. But I just don't think you go all in with both drivers in the hope for something like a red flag. Like, I don't think that was the main reason. I think they just mispredicted the weather, which is easy to do, but still don't do it with both cars. Like, especially as Leclerc has had a spin, bring him in to kind of, to hedge your bets a little bit. That makes so much more sense. So, very, very strange. A complete bottle, clearly. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but clearly a complete bottle. I mean, they were 1 and 2 for a bit, weren't they, with it? They were definitely up there. I'm not sure exactly 1 and 2. They were definitely up there.
They were 1 and 2, you're right. And that's where I was saying that, Hamilton's engineer was being like, almost... the way he said it to me was almost like saying, oh, you're P1, like almost getting excited. And it's like, and Hamilton's just like, well, yeah, but it's hard to drive on this tyre, mate, and the rain's getting worse, so it's not looking good.
And on the point as well regarding Crofty, like you said, I think the thing that he didn't factor in because he's not a race driver is just the tyre temps. Like, there was no way. But let's say 5 laps behind the safety car on slick tyres on a wet track, they would have been ice cold. And bear in mind, F1 still has tyre blankets, so if they drop below the tyre blanket temperature, you probably just can't heat them up, not without having a bone dry track, nice warm weather, and lots and lots of laps and very slow lap times to heat them back up again, maybe. But there's no way in a million years that was ever going to work. So they definitely were right to box. But it just doesn't make sense to me to go all in for both cars. It's silly.
Yeah, I agree. But I want to move on to talk about one of my winners for the Grand Prix, and no surprise, They're in the green. Lance Stroll absolutely cooked. He cooked. 6th place. No, I want to know who predicted Lance Stroll to be not just top 10, but 6th place. Solid points, 8 points in the first race. I mean, I get it, the circumstances, but still, considering Alonso, veteran driver, world champion, DNF'd from his own mistake, and for Lance Stroll to bring it home in P6 was a brilliant drive, and I feel like very underrated. I think so much happened in the race, and there were so many talking points that no one's really mentioned Lance Stroll, and there's a couple others in there as well, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But for me, Lance Stroll can definitely hold his head high from that performance.
#ad. I see you haven't got your Aston Martin top on this week, though, so you're trying to hide it. You can't get anything past me, mate.
I got the green in the background there, you know.
I do agree. Credit where it's due. Like Stroll, it was a very difficult race. Yeah, he's quite experienced now. But like you said, that world champion teammate binned it. It was very easy to do. A lot of people binned it. So fair play. He kept out of trouble. He or the team or both made the right strategy call. That or maybe the lap after was definitely lap to pit. And anyone who did put that lap gained quite a lot. So yeah, I absolutely nailed it. I mean, he didn't seem to have great pace all weekend. It sort of felt like a continuation of what we've seen previously, but it's so hard to keep out of trouble in that situation. So yeah, absolutely. Credit where it's due. I honestly can't disagree, unfortunately.
I think to be fair, his pace in qualifying, I could be getting this wrong, so I don't remember the final times they did, but I think he was pretty much on pace with Fernando in quali. I'm
just going to insert a doubt onto that, and I'll look it up while you waffle. Hold on.
Okay, I'm happy to be proven wrong. But yeah, I definitely remember watching qualifying. Maybe it wasn't the final run, but there was definitely a point where I checked the times and I was like, "Oh, fair play,"
No, you're right. In Q2, he was only half a tenth behind Fernando. Okay, fair play.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you see, I was impressed. Yeah. I was impressed, and look, I know he wants to be beating his teammate. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I don't know what the average gap to Fernando would have been last season, but clearly Fernando Alonso was the number one driver and the best driver last season at Aston Martin. So, really good opening weekend from Lance Stroll, and I'm sure that will, hopefully fill in with some confidence for the next race. And I think while we're on the topic of drivers in green, Nico Hülkenberg, what a performance from him. Kicked Sauber in 7th place. It was 7th, right? I believe it was 7th. Pretty sure it was, 7th place.
Yeah, you're right.
Unbelievable.
7th, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's a couple of drivers there that just absolutely nailed it, and experience really shone through, didn't it, in the Australian Grand Prix? You got Hülkenberg, super experienced driver, doing well.
Well, actually,
you got Stroll.
You say that, Fernando Alonso DNF. I mean, we'll put an asterisk on that.
All right, yeah, fair. Pop an asterisk on it. But I don't know. But in general, I mean, look, we saw most of the rookies retiring or having quite large errors, and we saw most of the experienced people coming to the fore. I mean, the results were Norris, very experienced, Verstappen, very experienced, George Russell, pretty experienced these days, Antonelli. He was obviously the standout rookie. Albon, super experienced. Stroll, decently experienced now. Hülkenberg, and then you had Leclerc, Piastri, Hamilton. Like, none of these guys are in, it's not their second year, or it's at least their third year. I think Piastri's probably the newest one in that bunch in his third year. So experience really shone through for sure. And yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone was predicting, as you say, Stroll in the points, but definitely not Hülkenberg, Sauber in the points in round one. That was unbelievable. And again, it's a similar pattern. There's 3 guys there that all moved together in unison: Antonelli, Stroll, and Hülkenberg. They were all next to each other position-wise before pitting on the right lap. They pit on the right lap, they catapult themselves forward, and they bring it home. So fair play. The only slight standout from that was Gasly, who for some reason just sort of crumbled at the end there. He was actually P8 on the safety car restart, but just lost. He lost out to both Ferraris and then Piastri, so sort of ended up outside the points, which was a shame for him, because I think he got quite a lot right there. I don't think he did too much wrong. He did pit a little bit too late, but he overall net gained 1 position throughout that whole drama.
I vaguely remember him making a mistake to what I can't remember where it was, whether it was sector 1, but I remember seeing both Ferraris pass him as a result of a mistake that I think he made, which I guess, because Piastri was flying through anyway, he was much quicker. He also overtook Lewis. So, I guess it was just that one mistake he made at the end, which, as you said, dropped him out of the points.
Moving on, I've got another. I've got an almost winner.
Okay.
There's a trend here. I haven't got boring this week. After that week where we just agreed on everything, I'm about to spice this up. An almost winner, Haas. Their strategy, if they stuck to it, they would have cooked. Genuinely, I'm talking podium level of cooked. I can feel the reticence. Is that the right word? So Haas, in the second safety car period, half through the race, Haas stayed out on inters, where everyone else boxed for slicks. They either went inters or stayed on inters, because the rain was due. But unfortunately, they ended up abandoning that and pitting for slick tyres and just shafted themselves, basically, because there was actually only 2 laps before it properly started raining. So I think there was 2, after the safety car came in, there was 2 complete laps. Then the third lap is the lap that Norris had to pit after going off. That's nothing. That is nothing on intermediate tyres. And even better than that, I've done some further analysis because I've compared Norris's last lap on inters before any of this drama, before going to slicks, because that's the most recent information we've got, compared to Norris on slicks. So I've used lap 30 for Norris on inters and lap 42 for Norris on slicks just after the safety car period. First lap, he loses 3.5 seconds. Second lap, he loses 5.3 seconds. This is versus himself. So effectively what the time difference was between inters and slicks. And then last lap, before he is off in the final sector, he loses another 2.5 seconds or so. So we're talking about something in the region of 10 seconds or so was lost across those 2.5 laps, which is a decent chunk, to be fair. But that's nowhere near a pit stop. What's a pit stop in Australia? I don't know, especially in the wet, 20, 25, maybe even seconds. So they would have been absolutely cooking if they went all in for inters. Because also you've got to bear in mind that Norris pit earliest. You've got people like Ferrari who completely bottled the strategy. You've got a lot of people, other people as well, that just stayed out a bit too long. They genuinely would have been right, at least restarting the podium. Who knows what would happen thereafter. Or possibly even the race leader. I don't know exactly where they were in the queue or how bad the traffic would have been. It was the right strategy. They had it and then they bottled it.
That's fair. The only thing worth considering though is how worn were their inters at the time when they boxed for slicks, because as you know, when the dry line comes in, I remember hearing Lando talking with his engineer about if it continues to stay damp but not rain again, stay on the inters because they turn into the inter slicks, which then gives you more grip on the dry line.
I think they used the term slick to mediate, which I quite like.
Okay, slick to mediate, I like that as well. So obviously if you box for fresh inters, then even though they're actually fresher tyres, they're worse because they're now running on a dry line and they're not kind of rubbered in like the slick to mediates. So I don't know. I do you know how many were they worn inters at the time they boxed for slicks? Maybe,
but the safety car, they were at the back and the safety car was 7 laps long. So worst case, you catch the queue, then take the inters and you recatch the queue and you're there. So I don't think they would have had to have used at least one of them was a lap. They may have both been a lap down, which definitely complicates that because they wouldn't have been able to unlap themselves until about 5 or 6 of that safety car period. So I'm not 100% on that. I certainly know Behrman was a lap down. I'm not too sure about Ocon whether in fact I can probably find out, but the lap down thing is the issue. But if they weren't a lap down, they definitely, because it was 7 laps safety car, they could have just boxed twice.
I tell you what, that would have been some story if Behrman, after bidding it in FP1 and FP3, suddenly just scored the podium at a Haas. That would have been phenomenal. That
would have been so good. Right, I'm going to see if I can find where he was lapped on the safety car, because now I want to know. Now I want to know, because if he was lapped, none of it matters. I want to know once and for all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's one thing I hadn't noticed actually. It's that would have been some story. Especially when you think about the Brazil race last season when Alpine got that insanely clutch double podium, which almost like changed the constructors and changed their whole fortunes. I know that was covered in Drive to Survive. It's almost like that happens in reverse, but at the first race of the season. Would have been crazy.
So just looking at the safety car meshes. So another thing to know as well, did you notice the gaps, the interval gaps weren't there on the timing tower for quite a lot of the race?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. That really annoyed me, and I do want to rant about that. We had it so good last season. I know we've had a bit of a UI graphics refresh, and I do quite like the new look of some of the things going on our screens now. Happy days. Why on earth? Well, what was going on with the intervals? Not just the fact that they were refreshing like every lap or something. It was something ludicrously like long to actually refresh the intervals and tell us what was happening with the cars in front and behind. But also there were, I don't know how many laps, but there were definitely multiple laps where we could not even see the intervals between the cars. They just showed their tyres or something like that. I think I just saw them saying like everyone's on inters or something, and I was like, this is like something we'd see on the F1 game. Like, what is this? Not from a professional broadcast.
So, first of all, I've finally looked up the safety car thing. Yes, both Haases were a lap down, so maybe that would be an RIP to that. But if they could have caught the back of the pack as well, I don't know. It might have worked, but it was, big question mark on that, fine. But yeah, in terms of the gaps stuff, so again, I've inadvertently looked into this because I've been doing so much data analysis today for the main channel video, and I found some really interesting stuff. But it wasn't adding up, and I was like, why is it not? What I don't understand. Like, I was adding up all the sector times to produce a gap chart so I could see exactly how far everyone was from each other, but it wasn't adding up. It was showing that like Max won the race. I was like, well, that's not right. What's gone here?
Yeah.
I was really confused. I eventually figured out that lap 4 of the race, the sector times don't add up to the lap time. So like there was almost a kind of glitch there, and it's actually by like 11 seconds, but like miles off. So it completely threw off all the gaps. But what I then realised was that my data only goes to lap 53, and there was 57 laps in the race. So there was some sort of data issue that they seem to try to resolve between lap 4 and lap 7 or so, because my data, there's no data between lap 4 and lap 7 on everything I've got here. This just doesn't exist. So there was some sort of issue during the race that they were clearly struggling to resolve. I also noticed that the gaps sometimes, even when they had them there, they would freeze and they just wouldn't ever update. So it wasn't just a case of they weren't showing it. There was some genuine issues, which we often find in race 1 of the season, which, you know, for £1 billion industry, they would be able to get their stuff sorted for race 1. And they don't even change anything this season. When they do a whole new overlay, you know, teething issues are a bit more forgivable. But anyway, yeah, there was some real issues that are manifesting itself even now in the post race data. So I can only imagine if there was things were out of sync or whatever, I can only imagine that would have been messing everything up internally for them. So there's probably panic stations behind the scenes. So hopefully they resolve that for race 2. But yeah, it wasn't just a case of can't be asked to show it. It was broken.
Okay, fair enough. I did notice it got better towards the end of the race, but it still wasn't. I don't know. It was still annoying me throughout the entire race. I think even at the end, it didn't seem like it was as frequent as previous seasons, and it's something which you just don't think about. It's, you know, that's just your bread and butter of watching Formula One. When have we ever thought about how often the intervals refresh? But all of a sudden, when that was taken away, I was like, I feel like I'm missing a massive chunk of the race, because you just, you know, while Crofty and Brundle are usually waffling on about some driver or some specific battle, we're often just looking at the delta times, and it might be someone down in P9 that's flying, and we can tell by the delta. But you're just blind in circumstances where there's rain, there's chaos, there's drivers that are obviously adapting better than others. And yeah, I felt like it really took away a part of the initial kind of half of the race, because I just didn't really know what was going on further back in terms of who was actually progressing and improving their pace, you know? So yeah, I was pretty annoyed.
Really interesting about this is that we shouldn't need that. It shouldn't matter that much. The TV direction should cover it better, regardless of whether there's gaps on screen or not. And the commentators should also cover it better, regardless of anything else. But it doesn't. So we just miss it. They just concentrate on one specific battle that's not much happening, if it's for the lead or whatever. And then you just miss all these amazing overtakes down in the field. Like, it happens so much. Like,
I mean, to be fair though, like with 20 drivers, I mean, I agree to some degree. They definitely should do it better, because I think the F1 broadcast has often had complaints and criticisms for a while now. But I think it would be quite hard to spot and talk about, you know, let's just say there's 4 or 5 drivers that are involved in spicy moments at similar points. It can't really just constantly be jumping around all the drivers, and, you know, you've got to have some sort of consistency to it, right? So I kind of get that. I like the way F1 TV, for example, allows you to jump on onboards and watch individual POVs. It's nice that we as viewers get to also dictate our own kind of view, how we want to view it. But yeah, I agree. They should do more from a broadcasting perspective. I think it just made me realise with the intervals how important they actually are, and hopefully we're not going to see those issues again. I would love to know what the actual refresh times are from, say, last season. Like, do they do it every second or 2 seconds or 5 seconds? Because whatever it was compared to what it was in Australia was clearly a lot quicker. So
Well, it's just the mini sectors, right? They have the mini sectors, which I think are marshal points. Technically, there's normally about I don't know if it's that number. There's normally about 10 per sector, so about 30 per lap, something in that region. So it's just every time they pass a mini sector, we get an updated gap. They tend to be I just happen to have been nose deep in all this data today. It looks like they're about every sort of 10 seconds ish on average. So like you get them fairly regularly, but that I don't think that's changed this season. It's just they just happen to be broken in this race. But I do agree with you to some extent. We can't concentrate on the whole race at once, but it's F1. We don't get it's not an oval. You know what I mean? We're not getting 10 overtakes per lap. I've got the lap chart here of the first 30 laps of the race. And there was, after lap 1, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 overtakes, I think, in total. 30 laps, 20 cars, 5 overtakes, because it was really hard to overtake. So we had Piastri overtaking Verstappen after Verstappen made a mistake. I think they did catch that live. We had Antonelli overtaking Hulkenberg, then spinning, then re-overtaking Hulkenberg, then a few laps later overtaking Stroll. So a lot of it was Antonelli. And then we had Lawson overtaking a Haas. And that's it for the first 30 laps. So it's not that hard to cover. Come on. It should be almost like you don't want to literally automate a race director's job. But to some extent, it should be like if gap goes under X in X zone. So it becomes quite formulaic, right? You start to learn if you're looking closely at the gaps. If the driver is within half a second, he's got a good chance at overtaking him at the end of this DRS straight. Yeah. If he's 8 tenths back, he's probably almost certainly not going to do it. So it should almost be like an alarm in the race director's room that's like, this guy's under half a second at this point of the track, this might be an overtake. Do you know what I mean? And then you can show it. It should be better than it is, but we do just miss so much stuff and you just don't see it live at all.
It's a good shout. There's a lot of times that, exactly what you said. We, as viewers, most of us can tell when the driver is 9 tenths behind another one coming to a DRS straight, probably not going to get the overtake done, depending on the track, of course. But then you often find that Crofty and he's waffling on about, is he going to have a look down the inside? And we're like, well, no, he's not. He's clearly too far back. We can see that. show us this fight in P10 where there's they're 3 tenths and they're obviously going to send it. And I completely agree with that. I think most listening to this and also watching everyone would also agree with that. I do regularly see complaints about the broadcast, posted online, and I mean it's slightly different. Obviously, we started this. We're talking about intervals, so slightly different topic, but still relevant. It's I would like to see a bit more focus, as you say. I think that's a really good idea. Actually, I hadn't thought of it like that. Having some sort of formula where maybe they just automatically changed or followed different drivers based on the gaps. I think that'd be a really cool idea.
Yeah, it is a difficult job, but they're obviously trying to concentrate on talking points. And it might actually be, although we're not about to see an overtake. Someone's trying to get within X margin of another driver to go for an undercut or an overcut. Whatever, it is more complicated than that. And I do think for the most part, the race directors do a good job. To be fair, I don't think they're bad. I don't think it needs a massive overhaul. But we do often miss little bits here and there. Like we didn't even see the Piastri overtake, did we? Live of him getting Hamilton and stuff. Where that could have been foreseeable, but. Anyway, I've got a slightly controversial winner for you, GB. I'm loving him today.
Come on, then.
I think a winner from the Australian Grand Prix was the McLaren team orders. I think they did the right thing by stopping Piastri overtaking Norris for a bit. The reason is, right, yes, it's race 1. They're not, there's no preference, whatever, fine. But right now, they've got the best car. They want a 1-2. They can see clearly they've got the best car. They're loads quicker than the next rival. At that point in the race, poor safety cars. They've got the best car. If they get anything other than 1-2 on about lap 20 of the race, where they were miles clear of everybody else, that's a massive fail. So you still got to let them race. You can't just go, let's call it off now, guys, let's bring it home. But there was a critical phase of the race there, which is when they called these team orders, which was the point that they were catching traffic. And normally as a chasing car, that's an opportunity. You think, he's going to get some dirty air. If he doesn't quite get DRS, but does get dirty air, I might be in there sort of thing. It's an opportunity. But can you imagine if they end up going 3 wide with a back marker, especially in those conditions, and it all goes wrong and they take each other out, or even just one of them gets taken out? Massive disaster. They saw that. They saw the danger in it and thought, do you know what? No, let's just for a few laps, let's get through the traffic, then you can resume, which is exactly what it did. And I think I don't mind that at all. As long as it wasn't a whole race long thing or whatever, for a few laps, fine, I get it. When you're in the position you're in.
I'm almost even further ahead than you here. I was annoyed at everyone else getting annoyed. The team orders were... Well, I think it was broadcasted quite well that it was there were team orders at the point, as you said, where back markers were involved. Complete and utter common sense. Let's just get through the back markers, guys. No mishaps. And then I think we cut to Zach Brown afterwards, and they were like, "Oh, Zach Brown, any update on the team orders?" And he's like, "Let's go racing." There you go, back to normal. I completely agree. I don't know why it's been it was such a talking point. It was, whether it's on my own Discord server or socials or whatever, it was everywhere. And I was like, guys, I feel like it's just people was wanting to create drama in the kind of environment we've got these days. People just wanting to kind of, make a big deal out of something which really wasn't at all. It was quite clear that, okay, team orders right now, guys, get through this phase safely, and then Oscar, you can go and attack Lando. Happy days. Yeah. So I mean, completely agree with you on that one. I want to say, and almost losers, and I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Almost,
the viewers,
okay.
I thought the viewers were almost losers purely from the first half of the race. I want to say as a whole, I really enjoy the Australian Grand Prix. I'm excited to be here talking about it. There were so many awesome things to digest and dig into. But the first, how many laps was it until we really had the kind of, there were a lot of laps, like 30 odd laps where not really anything happened. I think you said earlier, do you say there was 5 overtakes in total in the race? And I feel like the majority of those, 5 isn't much anyway, but I feel like they would have been more towards the end, obviously with Max's mistake and whatever, Piastri and Antonelli as well on the final chicane, the Sector 2 chicane. So for me, the first half of the race, and I stayed up to watch this, by the way, so you got a picture of zombie GB.
I was going to say, were you a bit grouchy?
Maybe that's making me a bit biased here. But anyway, I was in a zombie state on the sofa. Come on, give me some spicy action to keep me awake. And I'm not gonna lie, I was close to dozing off at points in the first half. Not saying I didn't enjoy it, because obviously we had the formation lap catastrophe. Isaac Hadger, we had incidents going on, but there was just, if we're being honest, pretty much a good 50% of that race, not really anything happened because no one could really overtake and conditions were that bad. And then thankfully, with the weather spicing things up and changing and, stopping raining, starting raining, that then caused the chaos and everything. I almost feel like, I don't know what it is, I think it was Zandvoort 2023. It reminds me of that race that was actually quite a boring race, but turned out to be phenomenal because it just went torrential rain out of nowhere and everyone started crashing. And I felt like it was kind of like that, where actually if you count up the amount of laps where things happened, probably not too many, but the actual Grand Prix as a whole was really good. Does that make sense?
I think you're a fake fan, GB. That's what I think.
Brilliant.
I had a normal good night's sleep. I woke up in the morning, fresh to Daisy, and watched the race without being a zombie, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I did mention there was only 5 overtakes in those first 30 laps or so, post-lap on. But I didn't feel bored at any point. Maybe it's because F1's back and I was a bit overexcited for it. I don't know. But I enjoyed it because, look, you had Max, Lando, and Oscar, not in that order, all really close in the first laps, really close to each other. You then had Max making the mistake, letting Oscar through. You then had Oscar hunting down Norris, lap after lap after lap, getting closer and closer and closer and closer. DRS was then enabled in the wet. You then had him getting DRS off the back markers, not back markers, DRS off Norris. He literally got there. You then had the team order stuff going on. You had it slowly drying up, and is it ready for slicks or whatever else? I think there was loads to go off there. I really enjoyed it. Then that's just the front three. You've still got other people making moves. You've got Antonelli making a couple moves and stuff. Yes, there wasn't that many overtakes, and I don't think you have to have overtakes, but I do think, at least the possibility of an overtake is quite important. But that's what we had. We had Piastri genuinely hunting down Norris. Everyone's talking about how Norris is definitely going to be champion this season if he's got the best car. Piastri's never going to beat him. Honestly, one of my winners was Piastri. I'm going to say something else slightly controversial. I think Piastri had a better weekend than Lando Norris, which I know is crazy. He was out-qualified by Lando by just under a tenth. Like, a small margin in F1, really. Like, that's not much. That's a small mistake here and there, whatever, a tenth. You then had, got overtaken at the race start, but he kept the pressure on Max. He pressured a multiple world champion, probably the greatest driver in F1 right now, into a mistake in those tricky conditions while he wasn't making mistakes. He then hunted down Lando, so showed he had better pace than Lando. His tyres never fell off, by the way. He was right on him until the safety car. Hunted him down, demolished Max Verstappen, by the way. They both ran away from Max by almost 20 seconds before the safety car. And was all over him, looking for an overtake and stuff. They both made the same mistake. Lando was just lucky that the mistake he made ended up back on the track, whereas Oscar's didn't. Just a bit. That was just pure luck at that point. They made the same mistake. And then Piastri recovered really well. He was making an overtake every other lap towards the end of the race. So he resumed on the safety car in P12, I think it was. And then literally every other lap he made a move, including that amazing last lap move on Lewis Hamilton, and ended up P9. I think it was an unbelievable weekend. Yes, he made that major mistake. And yes, he got out-qualified by Lando. But we're talking about less than a tenth of qualifying, and Norris made the same mistake. And he was quicker than Norris.
I think so. So I disagree because... And this is going to sound a bit strange, but Lando leading the race, normally the driver in P2 would have a harder job because they're getting hit with all the spray and visibility is much more limited than the leader. But actually, Lando was coming onto a lot of the changeable conditions, especially past that halfway point when we had all the chaos and both of them went off. Piastri got to react to his teammate, and I feel like being able to have a reference car in front of you for the changeable grip conditions and what's going on around you would help a lot in that scenario. I definitely think that Piastri had a good weekend. I know the result was bad in the end as a result of that unfortunate getting beached in the grass. Piastri did drive a great weekend, but he still got out qualified by his teammate. That's a fact. And for me, he lost to his teammate. Lando was still ahead. It's not like he overtook him. Lando was ahead on merit, and he held it after an unfortunate a spin or excursion off the track from both of them. So I definitely disagree that Piastri had a better weekend than Lando. I'm not with you on that one, I'm afraid.
But I think the mistake was clearly easy to make. A lot of people made it. Obviously the McLaren's made it the worst. If Piastri carries probably 5 kilometers an hour less that corner, has a slightly less slide, and stays on track while Lando's going off, Piastri gets past Lando, gets first dibs on pit stop, and wins the race. And then suddenly we've got such a different... I know he didn't. We've got such a different story. And it's not like, but he made a mistake, we're going to ignore that. Because Norris made the same mistake. So basically they ruled each other out, essentially. So we very nearly could have had a very different result. I know he didn't. And you're right, the facts are the facts. But the fact he was quicker than Lando in those really tricky conditions, was hunting him down, putting the pressure on Lando, got within DRS range, because he caught him by quite a bit while his tyres weren't going off. I thought I was really impressed with that. Really, everyone goes on about, Lando definitely world champion. He's so much better than Piastri. Blah 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 blah. But I'm hoping that Piastri can keep doing what he did in Australia, because super close in quali. That's a flip of a coin as to who's going to qualify who, if they're always going to be within a tenth of each other.
Yeah, I feel like what you were saying about Piastri is my thoughts on Max Verstappen. I thought he had a really underrated race. I thought, given the pace difference in the car, I actually predicted if the race was going to be wet, that Verstappen would win the race, just because that's how confident I am of Max's pace in the wet. And we had, thanks to Max, we had a really exciting, nail-biting finish with him hounding down Lando with DRS at the end. And he was able to keep with them the whole way. He made one mistake, one blemish on his entire race, which unfortunately cost him the position to Piastri. I think without that, Piastri probably is going to struggle to pass him, and we will never know. Piastri was obviously quicker, but it's very different in those conditions. I thought Max drove a very, very, very good race, and just because he's simply Max Verstappen, and we all know he's extremely good, no one really talks about it. But for me, I thought he was the most impressive driver on track. And I know Antonelli went 16th to 4th. He got a lot of the talking points and plaudits, rightfully so. A lot of that was down to strategy as well, though. I thought Max was very, very good. For me, Max, was he my driver of the day? I would probably say Max was my driver of the day, despite, on paper, maybe it didn't look like that. But the way the race unfolded, for me, Max was probably my driver of the day.
Do you know what? It's actually a fair point. I think Max almost, because we know he's so good, especially in the wet, almost ends up being underrated because he's so good. No, not because he's so overrated, but you know what I mean? Like you said, everyone was expecting off his wet, Max would be incredible, and he was incredible. He brought it to the McLaren's. I don't think that car would have been that close in the dry. I think McLaren should have been comfortably just pulling away from him like they did once the tyre wear started to kick in and the track started to dry out a bit. So yeah, it's completely fair. Max drove an incredible race. The only reason that people aren't talking about him so much for driver of the day is because it's Max. We already know he's incredible. So it's like you expect him to be incredible, which is unfair, really. So yeah, I completely agree. Max did drive an incredible race, and his mistake was relatively minor as well. He basically just went a bit deep in one of the corners, right? He didn't spin. He wasn't, backwards in the grass for a whole minute, or into the wall. He actually, it was a very minor mistake in the grand scheme, and a smaller mistake than most others in the top made. Although George Russell, I didn't see a mistake from him. I felt like George Russell was probably the highest driver to not make any mistakes at all. But maybe we just missed it on screen. I'm not too sure.
Yeah. George Russell was a strange one. I almost feel bad for him in a way because I don't really remember much about his race at all, and nothing really stands out yet. He finished on the podium. He had an absolute cracker of a result. He did great in qualifying. No one's really mentioned George Russell at all. As you said, didn't put a foot wrong. Unless I'm mistaken anything, I don't think he made a mistake or went off track or anything at any point. No. So yeah, George Russell definitely up there with driver of the day material. I thought he had a brilliant race, and I mean that's always been Russell's strength, hasn't it? Since he came in, he's always been super consistent. I think there have been races where maybe his pace has been a little bit off, but generally consistency is his specialty. And I gotta say, George Russell, if he does end up getting a car that can fight for wins and potentially titles, I can see George Russell as a future world champion. If he can put together that kind of consistency and what he's done in the past, I could definitely see him challenging for a world title if the car's there.
I completely agree. He just plugs away. I actually said to my fiance straight after the race, I was like, yeah, George got a podium just because he just plugs away. It's what he does. He just quietly goes about his business. He often... I'm going to say frauds a podium. I don't mean that in like he didn't deserve it, but like he just doobie doos and just does the laps, doesn't make any mistakes, and ends up in a decent position at the end because of it. Like he just keeps it simple really, and it rewards him. So he absolutely deserved the podium in that race. Yeah. Like even though they didn't quite have the pace of the guys in front, did a rock solid race and got a deserving podium. Now I've got one more winner or loser for you here. I don't know if you've got more,
okay.
GB, but I've only got one more left, so I'm going to hit you with that right now. And that was a loser for the safety cars. They were so long in the Australian Grand Prix. Now, safety, but they were too long. So there was 17 laps worth of safety car in the Australian Grand Prix out of the 57 laps. So quite a lot. But they were long as well. That was 44 minutes worth of safety cars in a 100-minute race. Almost 50%, 44%. Safety cars, way too long. The first one took 16 minutes. The second one took 17 minutes. The third one took 10 minutes. What? 17 minutes for a safety car period?
I feel like
what the hell?
That 17 minutes probably... Was it the Sainz one? Sainz and who else DNF'd at the same time?
The first one was Sainz and Doohan. And then the second one was Alonso. It was only Alonso, might have been.
I remember there being one where we were watching lorries on track at the same time, and it did look like they were faffing about a little bit. I don't want to undermine the job that the marshals are doing because clearly there's a lot of debris and everything to sort out. But yeah, I agree. I remember watching that at one point and thinking like, yeah, this seems. It's almost like I think it was at that point Crofty and Brundle were questioning whether they actually would red flag the race instead of bringing out a safety car. And I guess there's a bit of an argument for that. I'm not sure I would have wanted to see that necessarily. But there was a point where I was like, this feels a bit excessive with the amount of safety car laps under one in particular. But I guess, you'd counter that with the type of track that it is. I think Max was describing it as a bar of soap with how sleepy the circuit is in those conditions. So, I mean, the other argument is, well, you've got a lot of DNFs, you've got a lot of crashes, a lot of stuff going on. They obviously have to make sure it's as safe as possible, not just clearing the car. So, yeah, there's a bit of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't compromise safety. Absolutely not. But I think for starters, we had trucks going onto the track. which is how Jules Bianchi sadly died a few years ago, over 10 years ago now. And that the truck there was a hell of a lot closer than it was to Jules in that race. Yes, we've got halos now, but that doesn't excuse it. So that was a bit dodgy, but probably largely unavoidable. All I could think is maybe when the cars were coming past, they were having to get back behind the barrier because it was slippy, it was risky. So they were having to basically every 2 minutes the cars come past, they were having to spend 30 seconds behind the barrier. So that was slowing them down. But like, Monaco have already got this sus. They have massive cranes all over the track, and literally you have a couple of guys go on the track, hook up the car, and they just lift it off into the barrier. That's it, over the other side of the barrier, and that's it. Job done. Why are you getting trucks out, especially in those conditions, and then having to crane it, and needing lots of people? Like, it just takes too long. I think that was the main issue, honestly, for me, was the fact they were using trucks. It just takes so much longer, and it's more dangerous. Now, you can't, not every track can have infinite cranes around the track. I get that. Someone said, there's not enough room at Albert Park for cranes. Well, Monaco manage it. Monaco, you don't get any less room than at Monaco. It's F1, for God's sake. You can hire a few massive cranes, surely, at hotspots that are known for crashing. So it just was, like I said, I'm not going to call it unacceptable, because safety's safety, but it didn't feel like they were taking long because of safety. It felt like they were taking long primarily because they didn't have any cranes about, and there is, like, Monaco marshals are known for clearing stuff up very quickly, so maybe the Australian marshals are the opposite. I don't know, it might just be cranes. I don't know, but it just was too long.
Okay, fair enough. Well, before we close off, I'm going to ask you for a score out of 10 for the Australian Grand Prix. What would you give it?
Do you know what? I'm gonna dig down a bit. I'm gonna ask. I'll do it as well. I'm gonna ask you for a first half and a second half. As you already moaned about the first half, I want you to split it in two. So for me, the first half, the first 30 laps before the second safety car, I genuinely really enjoyed it. I wasn't remotely sat there going, like, yawn, this is boring. I genuinely really enjoyed it. For me, I'd give that first half like a 7.5 out of 10. Pretty decent. And the second half, obviously, with all the drama we saw with the rain coming down and the safety cars and the strategy variety and stuff, I'd probably only give it an 8 out of 10, though. Not much higher, but I overall, probably something like an 8 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed the Australian Grand Prix. It was up there with some of the best races without being one of the absolute all-time best. What about you?
Okay, so annoyingly, I'm going to give the same number for the overall race, but the first half of the race, for me, I was thinking more kind of a 5.5, quite a low score, because I'm not saying I was kind of dozing off, falling asleep throughout the whole thing, because that absolutely wasn't the case. It was a really exciting start to the race. It did keep me gripped. The gaps between the McLaren's at least kind of, did make it somewhat interesting. But I'd be lying if I said that there weren't 2-3 points where I was nearly falling asleep, because not much else was going on. So for me, 5.5, too many laps with nothing really going on. End of the race was unbelievable, and thanks to Max as well, and Lando, of course, we had a really spicy finish to the line. So for me, that's why I'm ending up also on an 8 out of 10. That was in my head before I asked the question. So annoyingly, I know you love to agree on these things together.
So basically, we had grouchy GB not enjoy the first half of the race, little bit overtired. And not enjoyed it. And then, I genuinely think pop that race in the middle of the afternoon on a nice sunny day, and I think your rating goes up. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with the first half of that race. Like, if all you want is like constant crashes and constant overtakes, yada yada, obviously yes, but we're both beyond that. So I think you're underrating the first half, and I think it's because you were tired. Grouchy.
Fair enough. Well, we'll agree to disagree. Anyway, we hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. Obviously, next week we've got the Chinese Grand Prix, so lots more to look forward to. I hope to catch you guys there as well. Don't forget, you can catch us on all the popular listening platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, as well as YouTube, of course, for viewers on YouTube. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thank you so much, guys, for watching, and we'll catch you in the next episode.